Most people believe becoming rich is just about working harder than everyone else. Wake up earlier, sleep later, save every extra rupiah, grind until your eyes burn. That's the formula we've been told since we were kids. But what if I told you that belief alone is quietly keeping millions of hardworking people stuck exactly where they are? Look around. You probably know someone who works incredibly hard, maybe even harder than anyone else you've ever met. They're always busy, always tired, always hustling, and yet their financial life barely moves forward. Meanwhile, somewhere else, there's someone who doesn't look nearly as busy, but their income keeps growing, their opportunities keep expanding, their life keeps leveling up. So what's really going on here? Here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't talk about. The biggest difference between people who stay broke and people who build real wealth is not just effort, it's mindset. And not the motivational poster kind of mindset, not the just think positive nonsense. I'm talking about the quiet, strategic, sometimes counterintuitive way wealthy people actually see the world. The kind of thinking that rarely gets taught in school, rarely gets explained in public, and honestly, sometimes sounds wrong the first time you hear it. For years, many of us were trained to play it safe. Get good grades, find a stable job, save your money, avoid risk. On the surface, it sounds responsible, it sounds smart, it even sounds noble. And to be fair, this advice does help people survive. But survival and wealth are two very different games. The dangerous part is this: you can follow the safe path perfectly, do everything right according to what you were taught, and still find yourself financially stuck 10 years later, wondering why nothing really changed. I've seen this pattern again and again. Hardworking people who feel frustrated but can't quite explain why. Disciplined savers who still feel financially tight. Smart individuals who secretly feel like the game is rigged against them. And here's the moment that changes everything. The moment most people never experience. At some point, people who eventually build real wealth start to notice something strange. They begin to realize that many wealthy individuals don't actually behave the way society told us they would. They don't obsess over small savings the way most people do. They don't always choose the safest path. They don't measure success by how busy they look. And once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. Because suddenly, the question shifts from, why am I not working hard enough, to something far more powerful. What if I've been playing the wrong game this whole time? That question is uncomfortable. It challenges years of conditioning. It forces you to rethink advice that sounded perfectly logical for most of your life, but it's also the doorway. Because the people who eventually break out financially usually don't start by working twice as hard overnight. They start by seeing differently, thinking differently, questioning differently. And in this video, we're going to unpack some of the wealth mindsets that rarely get discussed openly, the ones that might feel counterintuitive at first, but quietly shape how money, opportunities, and freedom actually grow. Some of these ideas might challenge what you've believed for years. Some might make you pause. And one of them might completely change how you approach money from this day forward. Because the truth is simple, but not always comfortable. If you keep thinking the same way, you will likely keep getting the same results. And the people who build real wealth, they figured out something most people never do. Let's talk about it. Here's one of the biggest mindset shifts that quietly separates people who stay financially stuck from those who start building real wealth. Most people are taught to focus on saving money. Save your allowance, save your salary, cut your expenses, be more frugal. And don't get me wrong, saving is important. It builds discipline, it creates a safety net, it teaches you control. But here's the part that rarely gets said out loud. Saving alone will almost never make you wealthy. Think about it for a second. You can only cut your expenses so much. You can only skip so many coffees. You can only downgrade your lifestyle so far before you hit a hard limit. There is a ceiling to how much you can save. But income?
Income has no ceiling, and this is where the mindset starts to split. Most people spend years, sometimes decades, obsessing over how to spend less. Wealth builders, on the other hand, become obsessed with how to earn more. Not in a reckless way, not in a get-rich-quick fantasy, but in a very intentional, strategic way. They ask different questions. Instead of asking, how can I save another $10 this week, they ask, how can I increase my earning power this year? Instead of stressing over tiny expenses, they zoom out and look at the bigger financial engine of their life, because they understand something most people overlook. You cannot shrink your way into wealth. Let me paint a simple picture. Imagine two people. Person A spends years cutting every possible expense. They become extremely disciplined, extremely careful, extremely tight with money, and over time, they manage to save a few extra $100 each month. That's respectable. That's disciplined. But person B plays a different game. Instead of only focusing on cutting costs, they invest time into learning high-value skills. They look for opportunities to increase their income streams. They experiment. They improve. They position themselves where money flows more easily. At first, person B might even look slower. But then, something interesting happens. Their income starts to stretch, their opportunities begin to multiply, and eventually the gap between person A and person B becomes impossible to ignore. This is why many wealthy individuals don't obsess over small expenses the way most people expect them to. It's not because they're careless, it's because they understand leverage. They know that spending mental energy arguing over tiny savings can sometimes be more expensive than focusing that same energy on building bigger income channels. There's a powerful quote that circulates quietly in wealth building circles. You don't become rich by saving money, you become rich by building cash flow. Now, does this mean saving is useless? Of course not. Saving is your defense, but income growth? That's your offense. And wealthy thinkers play both sides of the game, but they know which one actually moves the scoreboard faster. This is the mindset shift that feels uncomfortable for many people at first, because focusing on income growth requires you to stretch, to learn new skills, to face uncertainty, to step into rooms where you might feel inexperienced. And that brings us to something even deeper, something that silently holds many capable people back even when they know they should aim higher. It's not lack of intelligence, it's not lack of opportunity, it's something much more emotional than that. And once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere.
Here's the deeper barrier most people don't realize is running quietly in the background. It's not lack of knowledge, it's not lack of talent, and most of the time, it's not even lack of opportunity. It's fear, specifically the fear of calculated risk. Now notice the wording carefully. Not reckless risk, not gambling, not blind jumping. Calculated risk. This is one of the most misunderstood wealth mindsets on the planet. From a young age, many of us were conditioned to avoid mistakes at all costs. In school, mistakes meant red marks, lower grades, embarrassment, punishment. Over time, many people unconsciously build a powerful association. Mistakes are dangerous. Failure is shameful. Risk should be avoided. And for survival, that mindset works. But for building wealth, it quietly becomes a cage. Because here's what starts happening in real life. Opportunities rarely show up looking perfectly safe. Starting something new feels uncertain. Investing in your skills feels uncomfortable. Asking for a higher income feels intimidating. Building something of your own feels risky. So what do most people do? They wait. They overthink. They prepare endlessly. They tell themselves, I'll move when the timing feels perfect. But wealthy thinkers operate very differently. They don't wait for perfect certainty because they understand something most people miss. Perfect safety almost never exists in high-growth opportunities. Instead, they train themselves to evaluate risk intelligently. They ask, what is the upside? What is the downside? Can I survive the downside? What will I learn even if this fails? Notice the difference. The average mindset asks, what if this goes wrong? The wealth-building mindset asks, what if this goes right? And what's my protection if it doesn't? This subtle shift changes everything.
Because when you remove the emotional panic around risk, you start to see opportunities more clearly. You start to move faster. You start to gather real-world data instead of just sitting in analysis mode. And here's the part that surprises many people. Wealth builders are not fearless. Read that again. They are not fearless. They feel uncertainty. They feel doubt. They feel the same nervous tension most people feel. The difference is they've trained themselves not to freeze. They've built a higher tolerance for intelligent discomfort. They understand that small, controlled risks taken consistently over time often lead to outsized rewards. Meanwhile, people who avoid risk entirely often end up taking the biggest hidden risk of all, staying in the same place for years. Because while they're waiting for perfect safety, time keeps moving, opportunities keep passing, skills that could have been built remain undeveloped, income that could have grown stays flat. And one day, many people wake up and realize something quietly painful. Playing too safe was never actually safe. This is why many wealthy individuals become very comfortable with the phrase, test small, learn fast, adjust quickly. They don't bet their entire life in one move. They take measured steps, they gather feedback, they improve their positioning over time, and slowly, almost quietly, their financial world begins to expand. But even this mindset isn't the final layer, because there's one more shift, one that separates people who grow temporarily from people who build lasting wealth over decades, and it has everything to do with how far into the future you're actually playing.
Now we arrive at the mindset that quietly multiplies everything we've talked about so far. The one almost nobody has the patience to truly live by. Long-term thinking. This is where the real separation happens. Because in today's world, everything around us is engineered for speed. Fast results, fast money, fast validation. We're constantly surrounded by highlight reels of overnight success stories that make growth look instant and effortless. But behind the scenes, most real wealth is built slowly, then suddenly. And that slow part is where most people drop out of the game. Here's what typically happens. Someone starts learning a valuable skill. At first, progress is invisible. Income barely moves. Results feel small. Motivation starts to shake. Doubt creeps in. Is this even working? Weeks pass, maybe months, still no dramatic breakthrough. And this is the exact moment when the majority of people quietly quit. Not because the path was wrong, but because the timeline didn't match their expectations. Wealth builders understand something most people underestimate. The early phase of growth often looks boring. It looks slow. It looks almost unimpressive from the outside. But underneath, something powerful is building: momentum. They understand the principle of compounding, not just in money, but in skills, relationships, reputation, and opportunities. Small improvements stacked consistently over time begin to create disproportionate results. At first, progress feels linear. Then gradually, it starts to curve. And eventually, for those who stay in the game long enough, the curve can become explosive. This is why many wealthy individuals are surprisingly patient. They're not obsessed with looking successful this month. They're focused on being unstoppable in 5 to 10 years. While many people chase quick wins that look impressive today, long-term thinkers are quietly positioning themselves for outcomes that most people can't yet see. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Long-term thinking often feels lonely. Because when you're playing the long game, you might look behind at first. You might feel misunderstood. You might watch others appear to move faster in the short term. But long-term thinkers are willing to tolerate that temporary discomfort. Why? Because they're not measuring success by this week or even this year. They're measuring trajectory, direction over speed, momentum over momentary applause. There's a powerful pattern you'll start to notice once you look for it. Many people who appear flashy and rich in the short term are often under intense financial pressure behind the scenes. Meanwhile, many truly wealthy individuals live far more quietly than most people expect, especially during their building phase. They reinvest, they compound, they stack advantages patiently. And over time, the gap becomes undeniable. The truth most people don't want to hear is this. Wealth is rarely built in dramatic bursts. It's built in disciplined, often invisible decisions repeated over years. So if there's one question worth asking yourself after everything we've discussed, it's this. Are you optimizing for looking successful right now or becoming financially unstoppable later? Because the people who eventually win big usually made peace with one simple idea. Short-term comfort often trades against long-term freedom. And once you truly understand that, not just intellectually but emotionally, your decisions start to change. Your patience grows, your focus sharpens, your standards rise, and little by little your financial future begins to move in a very different direction. The game was never just about working harder. It was about thinking differently and having the discipline to stay in the game long enough for those different decisions to compound. The question is, now that you see it, what will you do differently next?